Now, once we've gotten to this first cause of change, a first cause for short, many people object to the argument, especially as it's formulated in Aquinas, by saying, well, all right, all you've proven is that there has to be this ultimate cause. Why would you then say that this is God? You haven't proven the existence of God. All you've proven is some first something. Maybe it's the force. Maybe it's some gravitational energy or something like that. Why does it have to be this all-powerful, all-knowing, eternal creator? Now, Aquinas himself never ends like that. What you have there is a summary in those 5 waves of the proofs for the existence of God. In his Summa Contra Gentiles and the rest of the Summa Theologica, he spends about 300 pages proving that this first cause, once we get there, we can logically prove it has to be something that everyone, in their right mind anyway, would call God. And Aristotle is similar in his arguing here. So what we're going to do is summarize a lot of that. And again, because it's a summary, there's going to be a lot of questions that you have. I will try to explain it in as simple a way as possible so you can at least see why someone as brilliant as Aristotle and Aquinas would think that once you have a first cause, you have God. So let's start with what we've left off. And again, you have to be very careful here because each of us come to this question about God with a lot of prejudices and biases. If you already are religious or believe in God, you don't need this argument, and you're going to not subject it to the rigorous standards of logic that you need to. If you come here already not believing in God, then you're not going to be willing to listen a lot of times to see, well, why would someone believe that you could prove it? So each of us have to put our biases aside and try to follow the evidence where the evidence leads. That is always the motto of philosophy. Follow the evidence where it leads, not farther than it leads, nor less far than it leads. So we start with, we know we've proven that there's this unchanging being that has to be the ultimate cause of change and therefore existence in the universe. Well, such a being would have to be eternal. Why? Well, because if it had a beginning, then there would be a change. It would at first merely potentially exist, and then something would have had to bring it into existence, which meant it would go from potential to actual, and therefore be a changing being. But we've already proven that this ultimate cause of change has to be unchanging. And so therefore it follows there's no beginning to its existence. It exists because it explains all the change in the universe, but being unchanging, it has to be eternal. And therefore can never go out of existence, because to go out of existence would be, again, another change. And so therefore we have this unchanging, eternal, and therefore uncaused being. Since this being is eternal, there's no before its existence, and therefore there'd be no need to explain how it got into existence. We've already proven it couldn't begin to exist. It had to already always have existence in itself, and the cause of all changes in itself. And so therefore, you hear the old question to bad formulations of the cosmological argument when someone says, well, the universe had to have a cause and it had to be God. Normally you hear people then respond and say, oh yeah? Well, what caused God? And now you understand why that's a stupid question. Because we've just proven that such a being would have to be eternal and therefore uncaused, which means there's no need to explain what caused it. In the same sense as if I were to ask, what color is C minor? That's a dumb question. C minor is not a visible thing and therefore has no color. In the same sense, if I asked what caused the uncaused first unchanging cause, that would be asking similarly a question that there could be no sensible answer to. So, thus we have this eternal, uncaused, necessary being without change. Well, again, when we consider the fact that it is unchanging, we also realize that there can be no mere potential to act in this kind of being. Because if there was a distinction between what is potential or actual and actual in the being, then the being itself would need something else to bring its potential into actuality. And we already said that such a being doesn't have that because it is unchanging. And so therefore, it can have no lack. It can have no lack of potential. It can have no mere potential, which means it is unlimited. Now this will be a little harder to understand, but think of it like this. Say such a being was limited. Then you would have what it actually is. Say it's limited to only being able to cause changes in color, but not in sound. Well, such a being, then, we couldn't say that it didn't have the potential to cause changes in sound, only that it lacked the actual power to cause it. And since nothing else could possibly cause it to do such a thing, then it would have to have that potential in itself to do it. But then it would have this distinction between potential and actual, and therefore it would have this possibility of being changed because it couldn't change itself, it couldn't bring that potential into existence itself. And so such a being would have mere potential if it lacked some power, if it was limited in its power and its actuality. And so therefore it has to be unlimited in power and being and actuality. It has to be a being of what we call pure act or actuality. Its essence is its existence, as Aquinas would say, which is merely to say that all of its potential is not mere potential, but pure being or actuality. Well then, if it's unlimited in power and actuality, then we have to say that it has all power, all actuality. It's all powerful. Well, isn't knowledge a power? Isn't knowing something an ability? Well, a being, therefore, that has all power, all actuality, can't lack knowledge. Because to lack knowledge would be to lack some power, again, to be limited, and therefore to have mere potential and not to be unchanging. And so therefore such a being, because it has all power, has to have all knowledge, because knowledge is power. And so thus we have an eternal, uncaused, necessary being who is unlimited in power and knowledge. Such a being can't be one among many of the same type. Why not? Such a being has to be absolutely one. Why not? Well, again, pretend there are two all-powerful beings. Let's call the one Jehovah, and let's call the other Jupiter. There's Jehovah and Jupiter, both all-powerful. Well, Jehovah decides that he wants to create a spear that can pierce any shield. And Jupiter decides that he wants to create a shield that is invincible against any spear. Well, if Jehovah is all-powerful, he can create that spear. And if Jupiter is all-powerful, then he can create that shield. But now we have a contradiction. Because if Jehovah creates that spear, then it can pierce every shield, including Jupiter's, which is a contradiction, because it's supposed to be invincible. But if Jupiter is omnipotent, then it can defend itself and never be pierced even by Jehovah's spear, which again is a contradiction. So either Jehovah can do what he wants, but Jupiter can't. Or Jupiter can do what he wants and Jehovah can't, which means if there are two beings that can do anything whatever that they want, that they're unlimited in power, it follows we have a contradiction. They're both limited by the other and what they can do. And so it follows that since such a being we've proven is all-powerful, there can only be one. Not only is this being the only one, but it cannot have any parts. Because again, if it had parts, then the parts themselves would be what it depends on for its existence, and therefore it wouldn't be first. But the parts would be before it or prior to it. But also, if it had parts, then it itself would have a distinction between potential and actual, and the parts could be rearranged, and therefore it cannot have any parts. It must be an absolutely unified being, a simple being. Simple not in the sense of dumb, but simple in having absolutely no division into parts, an absolute unity of being, nothing that could divide it. And so such a being would therefore not be physical, because whatever is physical is divisible into parts. So what have we proven? We have proven a being that, if unchanging, must be all-powerful, all-knowing, non-physical, eternal, uncaused, the creator of everything, because there can only be such one such being. And so if it wasn't the cause of everything else, then nothing else would have a first cause. But we say that every chain of causality must come to this first cause. So therefore, such a being is the cause and creator of everything, an eternal, all-powerful, all-knowing, unlimited, unchangeable being. If you don't call that God, I don't know what else you would call it.